Hello, everyone, and welcome to the pro wrestling mecca of the world in Cleveland, Ohio. I am your dangerously, dashingly, strikingly sexy, ever so smooth talking, trash talking, sky walking, awesome, amazing host, Nick. And with me, as always, is nobody, because this is PWPTV. You want to help the show? The Gmail's Pro Wrestling Pod at gmail.com. Once again, Pro Wrestling Pod at gmail.com. The Twitter page is at ProWPodcast. Once again, at ProWPodcast. Available on basically your favorite streaming service imaginable. Now, forgive me for the archaic way of filming this. Basically, my computer, for whatever reason, it decided it didn't like it doesn't like the internet, apparently, because for whatever reason it didn't work. So here I am, and I'm sorry for this monstrosity of a glare behind me. We're just going to have to work with what we have, and unfortunately this is what we have. But anyway, last month we took a look at wrestling controversies. This weekend we're going to dial it back a little bit and won't be as sad. And this month is going to be why companies failed. We're going to be looking at a lot of different individual companies. We have WCW, we have ECW, we have Glow, and we have Wrestling Society X all on the menu for this month. But today, as you can tell by the description of this video, we are going to be talking about WCW. Now, WCW was very, I don't want to say controversial with the events towards the end, but it left a very bad taste in a lot of people's mouths, mine included. For those of you who don't really know the final days of WCW, a lot of people want to attribute the finger poke of doom as one of the main downfalls of WCW. I said before, and I'll say it again, that I think it was Bash at the Beach 2000 was the downfall, because they were already on a downward spiral. That to me was just the end of it. And quite frankly, they dug themselves a hole that they just couldn't get out of at the end. They weren't willing to put new talent over unless if your name was Goldberg, which was a huge mistake. They didn't want. Everyone played politics, whether if it was Hogan, Nash, Hall, Jeff Jarrett, even Macho Man. All the old timers were playing politics, and it was inmates running the asylum, especially at the end. And you had Vince Russo's booking, which a lot of people attribute to. So, what is really the main downfall of WCW? That's going to be a question for the ages. A lot of people will say different things. But again, my own answer to that would be the Bash at the Beach 2000 incident. Now, that being said, I looking back at it, and history is weird. It really is, especially in wrestling, because you look at things and you think, man, that would have been really cool if it just succeeded. And I think that WCW and ECW a lot. I really do, because ECW had that niche audience. WCW never had that niche audience. WCW relied fully on just the Ted Turner's bangle for so long. So there was a lot of working elements, but I do think that WCW, when it folded, it was never going to take off. And in terms of, especially with Eric Bischoff wanting to try to resurrect it, he had a group of investors all lined up and everything, and they got the call. They pulled it fairly quickly right from out under him. And I think looking back at it, it was probably for the best. I think that in hindsight, really, if Eric Bischoff was to run WCW, clearly he wasn't going to use Russo. That kind of leaves Hall and Nash to be your head bookers, and look where it got them. So I just don't see that being a good starting point for a revamped WCW, if you will. It's 2018. We're well past the point of relaunching stuff. WWE has done countless amounts of things with ECW, and really just one WCW DVD, which is funny to me, because at one point they had enough talent to do a one-off show like they did with One Night Stand, even though there was two true EC, or was it two? Well, technically one true ECW show. they could have done that with WCW, around the same time. They had the talent. Um, they didn't have everybody, but it still could have been an interesting show that they just never capitalized on. I think WCW has a fair share of the old wrestling market still. WWE just they don't really see that, and I think that was kind of the problem. But anyway, going back to reasons as to why WCW failed, um, one of the reasons again that I listed was Vince Russo. Vince Russo was a cancer to WCW. Whether he admits it, Bischoff, Ted Turner, anyone for that matter, who worked at WCW during that time, they probably won't admit it. But I think that it's kind of hard to say that he wasn't a cancer, right? I mean, a lot of the things he did in WWE, he had that filter, but he didn't have that in WCW. And that was the main problem. There should have been a chain of command towards the end, and why there wasn't one, I don't know. And I think that's probably the biggest reason as to why WCW failed, was that there was no chain of command. You pretty much just had a group of guys just looking at each other like, oh, should we do this? Should we do that? And while they had higher ups, it didn't matter because at the end of the day, they were the higher ups. Bischoff wanted to be one of the boys. He wanted to be an NWO guy in real life. And that's why you had, again, the finger poke of doom, just being what it was. I think in the long run, I don't think WCW would have. I don't think that they should have resurrected it, but I think at the same time they could have. And I don't know why WWE never actually pulled that trigger to say, you know what, we have the talent. Let's just go ahead and do a WCW reunion show. Maybe around the same time as One Night Stand, maybe even earlier. Yeah, again, a lot of those guys were in TNA, like Sting, Jeff Jarrett. I'm not sure. Scott Steiner might have been. Well, I mean, 2003 he was with WWE, so I guess technically they could have done it then. But I mean, still, you have had him. You have had Booker T. I'm sure DDP would have came back for it. And then you had guys like Jericho and Mysterio who are under your contract anyway. And Raven was towards like the tail end of, well, in the beginning of 2003, so you could have had him in it as well. Billy Kidman. Oh man, how exciting would that have been to have a cruiserweight match, a true, authentic cruiserweight match. And no offense to any of the 205 Live guys, but it's not a, for lack of a better word, it's not a true division in my books. But that's a different story. We're not going to get into that. So, again, history is just tough. And I think that WCW ultimately failed because too many people were just calling shots. Too many people wanted things done their way, and they didn't want things done for the betterment of the company. And that, to me, is the biggest problem. You should have no problem losing. If you are a pro wrestler and you hate losing, then you shouldn't be a wrestler. A part of the industry is to actually get into the business, and yet you're going to lose. To me, it's no different than any other sport. Baseball, football, soccer, hockey, basketball, anything. You are going to lose. You just have to accept it. And while wrestling is predetermined, it shouldn't stop you from wanting to try to get other people over. I just think it's ridiculous that you have a guy like Goldberg who may not have been a politicker, but at the same time, he was not complaining that he was winning all these matches. And I just think, for one second, I've never heard any interview that Goldberg has done or WCW documentary where he questioned as to why he's on that streak. He never once did it. He was just kind of like, oh, okay, another win. And to me, in a weird way, I think he was accidentally politicking himself. And so that just goes to show, it just doesn't really matter who you are, especially in WCW's Lifeline, you politic some way, shape, or form. The early days of WCW were fantastic. That early 90s to mid 90s push was great. That was the best time in WCW history. Towards the end, it just got a little weird, and I think a lot of the talent will agree, but I think there's also a fine set of talent who will think that what they were doing was really best for business. I don't know. I don't see it that way, and I'm sure everyone else has an opinion out there. That's just my take on it. Well, that'll do it for this edition of PWP TV. I am your host, Nick. You can follow the show on Twitter at ProWPodcast. Once again, at ProWPodcast. The Gmail is ProWrestlingPod@gmail.com. Once again, ProWrestlingPod@gmail.com. Available on all your favorite podcast platforms on iTunes, Podcast X, Spreaker, Amazon, Alexa, YouTube, Spotify, and we have a couple more coming, so it's going to be awesome. I can't wait. So that'll do it for this edition, and catch the live show in 2 weeks' time. We're going to be running down Hell in a Cell, and I can't wait. Thanks for watching.